Whether you're focusing on business, brand, or your professional development, while you are dealing with the matters that are impacting your here and now, you also have to have your sights set for what's next. We're speaking with leaders on their personal journeys, on their stories, on how they have addressed the challenges of today while setting the stage for tomorrow. So here we go.
And thanks to the team at Hot House for putting this on. With that, Jeff, do you remember how we met?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was at a roundtable event. Was that it?
So Jeff won the Max Award. Do you remember this?
I remember it very well. Yeah.
So the GSU roundtable has what's called the Max Awards, and Jeff won for the app at ParkMobile. And I think you were so incredibly shocked that you won. Do you remember that?
I do, because I've worked the last several years at smallish companies that have had very limited marketing budgets. And so one of my go-to strategies was like, I'm just going to apply for every award out there because it's super cheap and you get good exposure. So it was a good, for people bootstrapping, it's a really good strategy to apply for a lot of these awards. And so, you know, the Max Award came up. I was like, all right, let's get our application in. And we applied, and we were invited to come to the event. And I tell people, I'm like the Susan Lucci of Atlanta awards circuit, like always like invited, buy a table, bring the team, and never win. So I don't think I even bought a table. It was like me and our marketing director went. And we were there, and it's like who's who of Atlanta marketing royalty. It's like MailChimp and Cox Auto and State Farm Arena and the Hawks. And I was like, oh, we're never winning this. And so they start calling all the people who were recognized, and I realized they didn't call us. And I was like, oh, that's bullshit. We came all the way here and we paid for the breakfast, and they just totally forgot to call us. And then they were like, so that brings us to our top three. And my marketing director was like, dude, no, they didn't call us because we're in the top three. I was like, there's no way we're winning this. And so they're like, and the top three are the Hawks, MailChimp, and ParkMobile. And now we're going to pick the top one. And so then they count down, like, number 3 is the Hawks. I was like, and I look at my marketing director, I was like, there's no way. And number 2 is MailChimp. And then they're like, and number 1 is ParkMobile. And we were so shocked. I had like nothing prepared to say. But it was, that was one of those really fun moments where, again, you don't expect to win, and then you win, and that was a great honor. So I thank you, because you were on the roundtable. You guys voted for me as part of it.
It was so cool. It was such an authentic moment. But ParkMobile really changed the game as far as parking. I don't know if anybody remembers. It used to be sometimes you go downtown or in Virginia Highlands and try to park, and they boot you. And ParkMobile
still do.
Still do, yeah. Just ParkMobile?
We don't boot people. We don't ticket people. We're just we are a payment vehicle. It was one of the things that I learned being CMO and then CEO of that business, because when I'm working for a business, I'm like all in. I'm wearing the T-shirt everywhere and the hats. And when you wore a ParkMobile T-shirt around, people come up to you. People are like, hey man, I like the app. I have a question. I got a ticket. And so that was like my life dealing with. So I was like CEO / head of customer service for ParkMobile, and I'm pretty out there on LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn became kind of like a customer service channel for ParkMobile. People just coming in telling me all of their issues they were having. But basically, we just gave people, we like to say, a smarter way to pay for parking. Super simple. So you used to have to go to a meter. And if you ever look at these meters and try to use it, there's one down here. It's like the worst user experience. Like, you couldn't actually design a more horrific user experience than on some of this parking hardware, because it's designed by like parking dudes, and it's just user experience isn't something they think about. Like, if you're in a parking garage and it's super confusing to get in and out, like, that's the same guys that are designing these boxes and these really confusing user interfaces. So we had a simple, easy way to pay for parking on your mobile app. And people just, over time really wanted to pay on mobile as opposed to paying at physical hardware. And plus, when you paid on the app, probably the number one benefit is that if you're out and about, you can't get back to feed the meter, you just extend time right in the app. And you can't do that on the meter. And so over time, people gravitated from hardware to the software. And we saw our business grow. I joined in 2017. And at that time, we had 8 million users of the app. And when I left the business last year, we were right around 45 million users of the app. And so it's just amazing growth story. And I feel very lucky to have been a part of that journey of just like a great Atlanta startup that went really from 0 to 100. And we had just a great time doing it.
That's awesome. Congrats. We've all watched ParkMobile rise and love having it in Auburn, Alabama too.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and I always want to text Jeff when it doesn't work and ask him, hey, what's up with your app?
I know.
Not anymore, huh?
Not anymore, sorry.
So you've been in marketing for a while. Big companies, small companies, agencies. What's been the biggest change recently that you've seen, and what are some of the challenges marketers are dealing with?
I feel like in the last 3 months, like our world was just rocked with AI and ChatGPT and how that's going to evolve. And I think there's a lot of things that are still being figured out, but that's a pretty crazy change that I think hit everyone pretty rapidly. And I don't know if everyone was prepared for it. So I don't know how that's going to evolve, but man, if you're not thinking about ChatGPT, reading about AI and how it could affect your business, you're going to kind of get left behind. So I think that's a big thing I'm seeing now. But when I started in advertising at Saatchi and Saatchi, I'm totally kind of like making myself feel super old, but it was like you basically had like 4 ways you can reach consumers. You had television, radio, outdoor, print, maybe point of sale. That was it. There was no digital. I remember we built like the first brand website. I worked on Tide laundry detergent, and we built Tide.com. And it was like, you can go into Tide.com and any stain you had on a garment, we had this like filter, and you could figure out how to get that stain out of the garment. We got all these awards, and we're like revolutionary like website. And that was like kind of the first step into digital. But that was, the mid to late 90s. And then, the one thing I've found is that change happens very rapidly. I think as marketing professionals or people that work in agencies, it's really critical to kind of think about how do you reinvent yourself like every 2 to 3 years. Because the way we did marketing when I started, where it was really heavy traditional, that's kind of gone away. The way we did marketing then you're like, all right, all this display advertising, that's kind of gone away. And then it's all about Google and paid search. And then, you think about with ChatGPT, the traditional ways of driving awareness and interest in a brand today, which are like SEO and paid search, that might be going away if people are getting their information in a different way. So I think it's important for marketers to constantly figure out, all right, what am I doing now? And how do I kind of like think about how do I almost make myself obsolete, by learning new things, by trying new things, and by really becoming a different kind of marketer. It's just but I think marketers are actually very well positioned to do that because we're creative and we're innovative. And if you're like me, I always find most people in marketing are sort of ADD, and we like new challenges and new things. And that really drives you to kind of always looking at the shiny objects out there and exploring them. So I think it, change actually is good for people in marketing because that's kind of how we're wired.
So are you using ChatGPT?
We are. We're using it now for a lot of the SEO work that would have taken us like weeks to do, and now you just do it in like days or hours. Our content team, actually, we have 2 full-time content writers at Greenlight Guru. They're using it to just do a lot of first drafts. And what's amazing is the first drafts are pretty good. So if I were just sitting around writing content, I would probably be a little nervous that this thing could put me out of work at some point. But yeah, content creation, SEO, I mean, it's been really powerful for that. And I think especially for like startup businesses, I've been talking to this guy in town. He's trying to start up a marketplace for small businesses to procure services, like if you need a plumber, or if you need an HVAC person. So kind of a 2-sided marketplace. And, last year, that's a big content play, right? You have to have a lot of content. Like, where do I find an HVAC guy in this city? So a lot of SEO creation. And a year ago, that would have been really hard. You would have to go hire a writer or an agency to help you with that. Now you can go into ChatGPT and you create a lot of blog posts that are pretty good really quickly to build out your website, to build out your SEO strategy. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I think the game's kind of changing right now for marketing. And my only advice is just stay on top of it and make sure you're keeping up with the latest changes, because I think in about 12 months, things are going to look a lot different than they do today.
Yeah, agree. I know the university system is freaking out over ChatGPT. And as professors, we're, like, it's not going away. So how do you use it? How do you adapt with it? How do you use it as a mechanism? The students will use it. So, how do we add to it? So interesting. Yeah. You're the first marketer, though, that I've talked to that's using it, almost, supplementing and almost replacing.
Yeah, I think everybody should be trying it. Yeah. I did a weird experiment the other day. I just said, because I post a lot on LinkedIn almost every day. And I just said, I said to ChatGPT, write 10 LinkedIn posts from Jeff Perkins. And it spit out 10 LinkedIn posts, and they were pretty good. And it was almost scary. It was like kind of in my tone. They use, because a lot of things I post, I'm very casual in the way I write. So it's like super excited about this. And so some of the posts were super excited about this, but they really nailed a lot of the topics I write about, which are about leadership, culture, marketing innovation, and they 10 really good posts. So if you're a social media manager, either your job's going to get very easy or you're going to be out of a job, because these are, this is a really powerful tool for people that are creating a lot of social media posts.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
So what are the traits you think that make a good marketer or a good creative?
Probably the number one trait I always think with marketing and creative, it's about resilience, which, you think, well, creatives need to be super innovative and have a real sense of design and how to message. But the hard thing about marketing, I always think, is that as a function in a company, it's by far the most accessible type role, type job, right? Because everybody's a consumer of marketing in some way. Not everyone is a consumer of finance, right? So like, people aren't going into the CFO's office and being like, dude, I was looking at the balance sheet and I don't really like the way you're capitalizing on, or your EBITDA numbers seem off. That's not something people generally do with finance. But you guys know, everyone will come into your office and be like, I hate this ad, or the website's terrible. And people have a very strong reaction to marketing as consumers of marketing. And they don't always understand the art and the science and the research that goes into creating, great, effective marketing. And so that's probably the hardest thing, is that you're constantly criticized. You're constantly under the microscope. Everyone thinks you should be doing something probably different than you are. And listen, if the results aren't what the company expects, you're probably going to be out of a job. So it's kind of a hard profession we've picked in a way, but it's also a profession where you could really drive incredible change within organizations. So I always think the number one trait I look for when I'm hiring people is around, like, is this a person who is resilient? Is this a person who could, take constructive feedback, who's going to be able to sell why we're doing something, and it's going to be able to take probably a lot of shots and be able to just power through it and still do great work and still do things that are going to move the business. That's going to, I think, the core of what I look for is that resilience in people.
Love it. What are consumers looking for today?
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing any new trends?
I don't know if I see new trends. The interesting thing, and working at ParkMobile, it was almost like it was like a laboratory around consumer behavior. And if you think about a business like ParkMobile, it was all about, like, you had the parking meter. So for years before there were even parking meters, I'm going to become a total parking geek right now, so bear with me for a second, but I'm going to make a point. So before there were parking meters, people would just park anywhere they wanted for whatever amount of time they wanted. And there are great pictures of from like when cars started first hitting the roads. People just like park in the middle of the street and get out and go shop for 3 hours. And that obviously for cities and people running cities, that wasn't something that they could tolerate. And so the parking meter actually came into effect because they're like, we need cars to park in a proper spot, and then we need them to what they call turn. So cars should only be parked there for like 2 hours, because if you're in a downtown business area, you need cars coming in and out because that's going to help the local business. And so that was the invent of the parking meter first. It wasn't really about making money. It was about getting cars turning. And over for 60 years, that didn't change. But suddenly, really with the advent of technology, people said, well, I don't want to pay at a parking meter with coins. I don't want to have to keep coins in my car. I want to use my credit card. And so then the parking meters introduced the ability to pay with credit card. And that was a huge, huge revolution in the industry, that you could then pay with card. And so that was the norm for a while. And then suddenly with mobile phones, people were like, I don't want to pay with a credit card. I want to pay on my phone. And so actually the first iteration of ParkMobile, it wasn't pay on an app. It actually was you called a number and you had to set up an account, and they had your credit card on file, and it was an IVR number, and you say, I'm paying at this zone number. And so that was how you paid with ParkMobile to begin. That's how the company began. And so a lot of cities started introducing pay by phone parking, and you would call in and pay by phone. And people were like, well, I don't want to call an 800 number to pay. I want to pay in these new apps that Apple just introduced. So that introduced the ParkMobile app. So then you could pay by app. And then people said, well, I don't want to download another app. I want to just pay in the web browser. So then we had to introduce a web browser. And people said, well, I don't even want to use an app. I just want to use Google Pay or Venmo. And so then we had to introduce all these new payment methods to it, right? Well, I want to use my Apple Watch. And so you guys seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Okay, so the way I think about consumers, they're like that character, Veruca Salt, like, I want an Oompa Loompa daddy. I want it now. Like, consumers will never be satisfied. And as soon as you meet their need, they're always going to want something more, right? Like they're always going to want something more. But for businesses today, you have to take that seriously. And the philosophy we had at ParkMobile was that you have to meet consumers where they are. And if you're not meeting consumers where they are, somebody else will, and they will switch. And so that was kind of the core mentality. And so as we launched new innovations, it was always about where are consumers today and how can we meet them? So when we launched Apple Pay, for example, that was really important because so many consumers were moving from just paying with their credit card to then paying with the digital wallet. So Apple Pay, Google Pay. The web app was a big one. We resisted the web app for a long time until it just became critical because consumers had app fatigue, stopped downloading mass apps. And so then they said, okay, now we have to have a web app as well. So it's just, it's such a grind. I mean, you just have to kind of constantly add things. And as soon as you come up with something you think is great, the consumers are going to want something more. It's the old, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Which makes it really challenging in a consumer business. But it's really important because, like I said, if you are not meeting consumers where they are, they will reject you. They'll go somewhere else if there's a viable second option.
Yes, so true. So we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about your book.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about the inspiration, the process.
So I never thought I'd write a book. And one of my coworkers at ParkMobile, John Brown, he had written a book, and he was reading some of my stuff on LinkedIn, and he was like, dude, you should write a book. Your stuff on LinkedIn's really good. I've read your blog posts. And I was like, really? And he introduced me to his publisher here in Atlanta called How to Conquer. And we ended up, working together. And I'd written at one point in my career, sometimes I'll take on like these crazy things, like I'm going to write one blog post a week for a year. So I did that at one point in my career. And so I had 52 blog posts, and it was about 15,000 words. And when I worked with the editors and the publishers, they were like, well, this is a really good start to your book. Because when you're writing a book, it's about 40 to 50,000 words. So I kind of had this head start. I had all these blog posts. I started stitching them together into kind of a coherent story. And so that's kind of how the book came about. But I think the reason I really wanted to write the book is because I was seeing just a lot of my friends getting fired as marketing leaders. And I was like, what's going on here in marketing? Why are all the marketers, and these are like really good, smart people, why is everyone getting fired? And it kind of occurred to me that there's a lot of occupational hazards in being marketers and marketing leaders. And so what I thought was, well, maybe I could write a book that's kind of like a survival's guide for the modern marketer. And it's interesting. And the title, How Not to Suck in Marketing, came up because I was at the Digital Summit event. They do those in Atlanta a lot. And when you go to the Digital Summit and you have a speaking session, basically it's like you're up against two other sessions. So I think when I spoke, I was up against like, SEO for dummies and social media best practices. And I wanted, I'm competitive, so I wanted the most people in my session. And I was like, I need like a really catchy title. And I was just thinking about it. And I was like, what would get people into a room? I was like, how about a session called How Not to Suck at Marketing? And I said, all right, that's kind of a catchy title. That could be fun. And so that was my title for the presentation. And I got to the room like 15 minutes before the presentation, and I walk in and it's like packed. Like people are sitting on the floors, they're lining the walls, there's no open seats. And I thought they were there for the session before. I was like, why is everyone here? They're like, they're here for this session about sucking at marketing. And I was like, I went up there and I did my presentation about how not to suck at marketing. I was like, wow, I think I'm onto something here. Like there's something in this title that's really resonating with people about, how hard the job is, how you try to do your best, and how sometimes even marketers who are great end up feeling like they suck and feeling like they're not moving the needle. And a lot of it's based on an experience I had when I took this job at a company called PGi, which was another Atlanta tech company I worked for. But, I'd gone into this company, and I mean, talk about a company that was doing like everything wrong when it came to marketing. I mean, it was like, you couldn't read the logo. The logo was like not legible. They were trying to compete in the web conferencing space. If you went to their website, you land on the homepage and it's like a country finder. So like no SEO. They were trying to rank for web conferencing. They were like on page 7. They were just plowing money into paid search, but they weren't being targeted. So it was funny. We had a product called iMeet. It was a web conferencing product called iMeet, which is a really cool product. It's kind of like Zoom before Zoom. And when I was going in and looking, they were spending so much money on search marketing, but they were being untargeted. So if you search, how can I meet Miley Cyrus, an ad would pop up that would say, get a free tour of iMeet web conferencing. Oh, no. So just doing everything wrong possible that you could do wrong. And so I went in there, I was like, oh, this is going to be easy, man. It's like everything's broken. I could just fix. It's going to be quick wins and moving the needle. And then like 6 months in, I was like, wow, I've made no progress. And which happens because a lot of the things you have to do to make change within an organization are very hard, right? Like if you need to redo the brand, if you need to update the website, if you need to, God forbid, you need to rip and replace the marketing automation system. I mean, those things are 6, 12, 24-month projects. And 6 months in, I was like, I am terrible. I'm going to get fired. And it was just that feeling, that sinking feeling you get sometimes when you're not able to put runs on the board. You're not able to make enough progress fast enough. And you really do feel like you suck, right? And so that kind of, that was the driver for the title of the book.
So what are key takeaways?
I think one is about what I call having a quick win strategy, and really being able to not just focus on the big things. And I think this is where a lot of marketing leaders sort of make mistakes. You come into an organization and you're like, well, I'm going to do all these big things. And 6 months later, people start looking at that marketing leader. They're like, what are they doing? I'm not seeing any results. So it's about finding what are these quick wins that you can put on the board so you can start kind of building your internal credibility, especially with your executive team, your CEO. Like, oh, I'm glad we hired this person. They're really moving the needle. They're doing stuff. Sometimes leaders in a company equate doing stuff and like even if it's simple stuff with results. And so having a really good quick win strategy. The second thing is getting the right team around you. And I found, unfortunately, that sometimes you come into an organization and if you have the wrong people around you, you will probably not be successful. I love the term marketing automation, which is it's such an oxymoron. There's nothing automated about marketing. Even these tools are so complicated. They're not automated. And if you don't have the right team in place and the right people in the right roles, you'll probably, marketing is such a team sport and requires so much expertise in the different areas. If you don't have the right people in the right places, you probably won't be successful. And then the last thing I talk about in the book is the importance of showing your work as a marketing team and not being the traditional black box. If you're ever in a meeting with a CFO and you say things like, oh, trust me, or oh, you can't measure that, or you got to spend money to make money, you will be fired as a marketing leader. The key is actually being very transparent with the organization on what you're doing and what the results are, and if the results aren't what you want, what you're changing to get the results you want. One of my favorite things that happened to me, this was at PGi. PGi, like the marketing team was they're like, we operate in a black box. We're not going to show our work. We're not going to tell people what we're doing, but they have to just trust that we know what we're doing. We're experts and we're going to deliver. And they weren't delivering. And so we became almost overly transparent with our finance team. And we said to them like, hey, we're open in the kimono. We're going to show you everything. And what the coolest thing was, like, you realize like finance people like numbers and analytics, and marketers have tons of numbers and analytics today. And by showing them that, we built so much credibility, and we taught them about how to evaluate your search marketing program, and how do you evaluate, like, is it getting better, is it getting worse? And I remember our CFO came into my office one day because we were like, the company was had some savings in a quarter, that they had some planned spend in another department that they didn't spend. And he's like, hey Jeff, we have an extra like $200,000. Would you be able to use it in some of your search campaigns this quarter? Like a CFO coming to the marketing guy and like giving me more money. I'd never seen that before in my career, but it was all because we were totally transparent. He knew where the money was going. He knew we knew how to put that money to good use. So building that relationship and being transparent with your data is critical. And the last thing was the alignment with sales. Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing. In a lot of organizations, and Don Dixon's here, who I worked with at Autotrader, and Don would, the marketing team and the sales team at Autotrader were just like, I've never seen teams like more at odds with each other. Like the CMO at the time hated the chief sales officer. It was just a brutal relationship. And I when I was at Autotrader, I was doing B2B marketing. So I needed the sales guys. I needed their help and their input. And I got out in the field and I was going on sales ride-alongs, and I was really working very closely with them. And that alignment drove a lot of great work out of marketing that was really helping the sales team. And then at PGi, I started as a VP of marketing there, and they gave me a sales team to run actually as part of under marketing. And when you run sales and marketing together, there can't be misalignment. And so what I started doing is I was having my director of marketing every day talk to my director of sales and see what was going on, how are the leads looking, what deals are progressing. And we were kind of like optimizing in real time based on feedback from sales. And the impact was incredible because you're able to see like, oh, if we do these things, it's getting better leads to sales. Sales are closing at a faster rate, a higher rate. So let's do more of that from a marketing perspective, or vice versa. Hey, we turned on this campaign. We just saw a lot of really bad leads come in today. So turn off that campaign. So real-time optimization based on feedback from sales. So those are a lot of the things I talk about in the book. There's probably some others as well, but it's all about how do we get better? How do we collaborate? And then how do we have the right team, the right people, and the right programs that are going to drive really the best results for the organization?
I love the book and have
Thank
given
you.
it to many people. So shifting gears, talk a little bit about the swag wars and tell the group about it and how it started. And
Yeah, so Swag Wars was a bunch of the marketers in Atlanta, we would like show off like the cool swag, and there's kind of a lot of street credit who has the best swag. And then we started sending each other swag bags, and it was just kind of a fun thing. And Joanne sent me stuff, I sent her stuff, and it was really just kind of fun to get different people's swag and see it. Like I'm actually, there's a lot of opinions on swag, and a lot of people sometimes reach out to me like, Jeff, you're killing the environment with all this swag. People take it and they throw it away. But again, when you're at a small company, and my last couple of companies have been smaller, like swag's really important on a couple levels. One, it's kind of human media, right? People wearing the swag. If you can't afford advertising, you create human billboards with people wearing your swag. But I think internally, it's really a gauge for how excited team members are about the company. Like the thing I loved about ParkMobile and my current company, Greenlight Guru, when you see people, everyone's wearing t-shirts and hats and sweatshirts with the company logo on it. That's really cool because, you guys know if you're not proud of where you work, you're not going to wear the logo. But if you are proud and you kind of bleed the corporate colors, you're happy to put that shirt on. It was really hard actually when I left ParkMobile because most of my wardrobe was ParkMobile stuff. So I didn't. I was like, man, I got to go get a whole nother wardrobe. But yeah, we have a lot of fun with swag, and then I started doing ratings of swag on LinkedIn. So there's a whole swag rater thing I've been doing. But it's just fun. I think corporate swag is kind of cool, and I'm always looking for new ideas about what swag item. But if you go to events and you go to trade shows, you guys know it's like if you have good swag at your booth, you'll get a lot of people in there, and that's a good door opener for a conversation. My favorite at ParkMobile, we would design for trade shows. We would design custom shirts, and we actually had a screen printer like in the booth making the custom shirts, and there'd be a line like around the conference room, the conference hall, to get those custom shirts. So I never underestimate the importance of swag as part of like your overall business.
did you bring any to show and tell?
I did.
Yeah, I did too. Let's compare notes.
All right. First of all, this is a great backpack.
Oh,
This is the Greenlight Guru logo.
Oh, that is.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
Love it.
Yeah. So
Did you?
you got to have a good backpack. That's almost like if you're looking at the stuff you need a good backpack, you need a good T-shirt. Those are really important.
Mm-hmm. What's in there?
Okay, so I got
Ooh.
this is what we call premium swag, right? It's a Yeti.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. I have so many Yetis from different brands now. It seems like everyone just gives out Yetis these days, but this is a really nice one. High quality, you could use it for self-defense if you need to. It's very heavy. It's a very nice swag item.
I haven't gotten mine yet.
Huh?
I haven't gotten mine.
You haven't gotten your Greenlight Guru swag bag. I gotta take care of that. And then the other swag item that I think is super important. Oh, by the way, socks.
Oh yeah.
Socks are really great. Like at trade shows, people just love socks. I don't know what it is when we go to trade shows. But the thing and maybe it's because I'm a bald guy, but the trucker hats are critical. I think these are like from a swag perspective. Honey baked ham.
Yeah.
I'm was part of the ham fam. This was a cool ParkMobile one with like the leather patch. And then my friend John Ziegler, he works at a company called Rent Path now. They rebranded to Rent. But these are really great, really high quality. I don't skimp on hats. Like bad hats just go in the trash, but good hats people will wear forever. So like the trucker hat for me is kind of the essential swag item that is an indicator of, your corporate health, right?
Love it. Yes. So I'll share. This is a swag bag from a destination wedding.
Oh, wow.
It's not my favorite, but I needed it to house the swag. I was on a podcast, and he sent me a microphone. I don't have it set up, but I haven't thrown it away, so thought it was pretty cool.
That's a really high quality microphone.
Yeah. Honey Baked, you mentioned this. I think when you have good swag, it does change the culture of a company, and it became the company uniform. So my favorite piece of swag was the new brand denim Honey Baked jacket. So anyway,
is that that's a real Levi's jacket, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's whatever Icebox.
Okay, that's really
nice.
But
they actually sent it so that other people in the company, and then we sold these on a swag site. And but I agree, and it's been fun to do the swag wars with you.
Super fun.
So our hashtag is swag wars. So if anybody has good swag, Jeff will rate it.
Yeah, if anyone wants to send me swag, just let me know, and I'll rate it on LinkedIn.
He'll have Chat GPT rate it for him.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. You're a philanthropist, and I know we did some ride and raises, and you've got something coming up. So tell us a little bit about that part of you. And
I think it's always important to try to carve out time to give back in some ways. Like in Atlanta, I've been involved in volunteering time at Techstars, which is a really cool organization. If you haven't checked that out, it's a kind of an incubator. We've raised money, and at every company I've been at, I'm always amazed by the, how when you, in an organization, when you kind of infuse philanthropy, how energizing that is to to the customers that you work with, to your internal employees. And just it makes you feel really good. At ParkMobile, it was very interesting. We would be able to, during COVID, our business really kind of fell off a cliff because people aren't going out, they aren't going to their office, they aren't going to concerts, no one's parking. And so we turned the app actually into a donation tool. And so we raised money in a lot of the cities we worked for people that were affected by COVID, people that were losing their jobs. And so we donated, and then we actually let people donate through the app. So while you weren't using the app to pay for parking, you could still use the app to donate to some really worthy charities that are in your city. I just think it's a really important part of being kind of a business today, is figuring out how do we not just do really good work for the company and grow our business, but how do we do good work outside and support our communities that we operate in. And so my latest thing is I committed to running the New York Marathon in November, and I'm raising money for a charity called Kilometer Kids, which is by the Atlanta Track Club here. So if anyone's interested and you want to drop a small donation in, I'd appreciate that. I've raised, I think, $3,500 so far for that charity. We have a team that's running the marathon. We're trying to raise about $50,000, but a really cool charity. But I think, it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind of work, but you kind of have to, make time for things like charity, giving back, both from a company perspective and also a personal perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Well, I want to open it up and see if anybody has any questions on Zoom or in the audience. No, Don.
I had the joy, really was, of working with Jeff for multiple years. And I don't have a question, I just want to give him a compliment. Jeff and I worked in an environment where the head of marketing was really not a marketer. He was an advertising guy. And he didn't understand integrated marketing. And he didn't understand how to use all the channels. And I had tremendous empathy for Jeff because what he had to deal with, and frankly, I had to deal with for a lot. And I want to compliment him because he does see the entire spectrum of how to engage with the consumer. And I love the idea where you're going with, clearly with swag. I was at Anheuser-Busch. There is no better swag
Right.
recycling world than Anheuser-Busch than what we have. And I want to compliment him on what he's done with his career and what he's done with literally adopting all new technologies as quickly as he can and bringing it to his employers that have a positive, impact. So, sometimes I rip your butt. But not today. So.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, Don and I worked together at Autotrader, and I think both of us probably had some challenges there. But it was
all I was short.
right. But I always look at that experience as like, because I think when you're in a job sometimes and it's not going great, there's so much you realize after the fact that you learn from those experiences. I wrote this blog post called it was titled "Good Lessons from a Bad Boss," and it's in the book as well. But I was thinking about that. I was like, man, I'm so grateful that I had a bad boss in my career, because you just learn so much from those experiences. I'm so grateful I had like a lot of adversity and a lot of challenges like that we did at Autotrader, because man, it made me such a better professional, made me a better marketer. So sometimes, you have to, kind of, when life gives you lemons, you got to make lemonade out of it. So if you're in a position like that, you got to look for the positive. And the reality is, nothing's permanent, nothing's forever. You'll go on to another job and you'll have learned some really great lessons probably from some of the things you had to work through.
John?
First of all, this has been great.
Yeah.
I have a question about ParkMobile data.
Yeah.
The sample size has to be so enormous. What are some of the interesting sort of data trends that you're all great to see, just, with tens of millions of people kind of knowing their driving habits and where they go through the day?
Yeah.
What kind of sticks in your mind?
Yeah. We sat on a mountain of data, but it's the old saying, drowning in data, thirsting for insights. I mean, we were kind of in that. I don't know that we ever really cracked the code on what to do with that data and how to really leverage it. I mean, I could tell you some interesting things. So when I started at ParkMobile, every day, the app was really brittle at that point. And if anyone used it back in like circa 2016, 2017, if it was like noon on the East Coast, the app probably wouldn't work because it had so many people using it. But that's a good indicator of how the day went. So you could kind of see on the heaviest volume days were always this is probably more pre-COVID, but it was always Tuesday to Thursday. And you start around 9, you go to 5. So it was a really big commuter app. Those were the biggest users. You also had really a 90-10, like the power users, people using it over like 20 times a month, accounted for about 90% of the revenue for the business, and everything else was a casual user. But you could look across different cities. The interesting thing is during COVID, we could actually see what cities were shutting down and what cities weren't. And that was really interesting. We got a lot of good industry buzz out of that data, because you looked at cities like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York. I mean, very low volume from a parking perspective. And you looked at cities like Florida and it was going up. So it was kind of an interesting to see how different cities react. And then actually when things were reopening, you could also see some cities opening faster, some cities opening slower. And you got a lot of insights around which cities are actually going back to the office and which weren't. So yeah, there was just a ton of data that we had that we could answer a lot of questions about. But I don't know. I think we were only scratching the surface of what you could really learn with the data we had. But it was really interesting, especially I think during COVID, we started realizing, hey, we're sitting on a lot of really interesting insights here. We should put out in the market to kind of help people understand, what's happening. Like our city's going back, and an interesting thing, like as of December. Before I left ParkMobile, I mean, we were still seeing like most major cities are down about 20% where they were pre-COVID
Wow.
from a transaction volume perspective. And what that means is that people still aren't going back to the office in the United States. And I think probably most people here would agree with Atlanta is a good example where you have big office buildings that, where you have nice offices that are like a quarter full some days. And most days are almost empty. And so, it's going to be interesting the next couple of years to see if people are forced back to the office or not. It's something we're I'm very curious about, because I think getting into the office is important. But are you going to get people back 5 days a week? I'm not sure.
I think Tara had
My
a,
question.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were remote, so I was curious to know what your thoughts are as a leader, in person versus remote versus hybrid. And
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard, especially I think I get a lot of energy from being around people and being with the team, and there's no way to replicate that on Zoom. If I have to go to another Zoom happy hour, it's just,
they're still happening.
oh gosh, yeah. I think we have Zoom trivia today. It's important. You have to do those things.
Yeah.
But you have to also be very intentional about getting together with the team. We try to do it, like my marketing team at Greenlight Guru, we try to get together like once a quarter at least. And our executive team does, we get together every other month in person. It's just critical. It's very hard, in business, I feel like everything's based on trust. And it's very hard to build trust virtually. And so if you're not together frequently enough, it's just, I think you're not going to have trust. You're not going to be a high performing organization. So it's a really hard thing for leaders to navigate today. At the same time, we want to hire the best talent. We don't want to be constrained by, you have to be in a certain city. So I don't really know how things are gonna net out. My guess is, though, over the next couple of years, you're going to probably see a migration back to people being in office and people hiring again locally as opposed to remotely. I mean, one of the frustrating things we had at ParkMobile is that, we had, for people who were with the company pre-COVID, those people we were retaining at like 100%. None of them were leaving because they love the people, they love the culture, they love what we were doing. They were all in, but everyone, we had, I think our attrition was like 20%, but it was all people who joined during COVID. So they joined the company virtually. They never really got integrated into the culture. They never really drank the Kool-Aid as much as the people who had kind of known people in person. And so that's really interesting, right? As you're thinking about, can you really be a high performing virtual organization? I'm sure you can. I'm sure there's ways to make it work, but man, it's hard because, if you're just getting a paycheck and you're on Zoom all day at one job and you get an offer that's, 10, 20% higher at another job, and that job you're on Zoom all day also, there's no loyalty to the company. Like, you just kind of jump to the next one. So it's a hard thing that I think leaders are going to have to grapple with going forward. I don't think being 100% virtual, though, is sustainable for a lot of companies.
We've got one more question.
Well, no, we can do more.
Okay.
But, I have a question on Zoom.
Yeah.
Steve Denker. And he said, Jeff, you've always been very bullish on the Atlanta tech startup community. Is there anything you're specifically excited about today or coming soon within our hometown tech ecosystem in Go Birds?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of really exciting businesses that are starting up in Atlanta right now. There's one called Sonar, which is software in the RevOps space. It was some guys out of Terminus started it up. They're getting a ton of traction right now. I think they raised a series last year, maybe. But I think if you're in B2B SaaS, and RevOps is a huge thing for these companies, and it's a really good software. So that's one that I think is really interesting. There's a software called Grayshift, which is out of Atlanta Tech Village right now, which is really exciting. They're basically starting to they're taking kind of the sort of a gig economy of people who work hourly jobs at like a Best Buy or a Home Depot, and they're selling it into the company, but they're making it easier to schedule those hourly workers. And apparently there's just a total hole in the industry when it comes to that kind of technology. So very small company, but growing very fast. And I think that's a very exciting one. And the third one I really like, and it's a consumer app, which is close to my heart, but it's called AnyDistance. And it's a fitness app, like it tracks your workouts, but they really lean in hard on the design and the user experience, and it's super cool. And they're trying to make it kind of a social network for people who like to exercise, which is a super crowded, competitive space, and it's not going to be easy, but that's another one. And if you go on the Beltline at all, if you ride your bike or run, they just did some billboards up there. So definitely check out the AnyDistance app, and that's out of Atlanta too. So those are just a few of the exciting ones I think off the top of my head, but there's just so much really cool innovation happening in the city. It's really inspiring, actually. Like I said, I'm involved in Techstars. I'm involved in the Atlanta, Atlanta Tech Village scene. There's just great stuff coming out of here. And so if you're not involved in it, I encourage you to maybe go to check out some of these events, because a lot of very, very exciting businesses happening in Atlanta right now.
I'm going to test you here.
Oh, God.
You would expect nothing less.
Nothing less.
Bud Light. We've all seen what's gone on. I obviously worked there. I got my points of view. I was there when we introduced, Bud Light, so helped build the brand. As you, as an outsider, as a marketer, I know you've looked at this. What do you think they could have possibly done to avert such a negative backlash?
Oh, gosh. The hardest thing is that when you take a hit like that, and you're Bud Light, and you don't have a prepared response, you're really in trouble. I mean, I think that is probably the worst part of it. Isn't that what they did created outrage, or people were mad, or they were supportive. It was that they just stayed quiet. And I think part of it was they were hoping it would blow over, and clearly it didn't. And so that was challenging. They seem to have not considered that it could have had, that what they were doing could have had some blowback, and they didn't have a response. And when they did issue a response, it was super generic. And what's that? And so you didn't really know what to take from the response. And so, I mean, I think if they said, we're committed to this, we stand by it, we believe in, people should be who they are, and we celebrate everybody, and we're a brand for all. Or if they said the opposite, they're like, hey, we didn't see this and we apologize. I mean, they could have gone either way. But they kind of didn't do any. That one, they stayed quiet as everything was swirling around, and then two, they finally came out with a response, and it was very mild mannered. I don't know. I think they handled it probably about as badly as you can. But gosh, if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would have done either. I mean, that's an impossible situation. I think marketers probably learned a lot about it, but I mean, who would ever think you'd get embroiled in sort of like culture, unintentionally embroiled in like culture war issues and all these things? I mean, it's not like, we all have perspectives on these things, right? And, one thing that I've always learned is that as much as I hold some firm beliefs on something, you can't assume everyone else holds those same beliefs. And as brands, you do have to be a bit careful. And now some brands go all in, and they're like, this is what we believe, and we don't negotiate. But a brand like Bud, clearly they don't know what they stand for when it comes to these things. And they brought in this woman to change the brand and to kind of appeal to get more people into the tent. But then when she does that, basically they put her on leave and pull the rug out. So I don't know. It's the hardest thing. I think the thing I learned though from that is that if you're going to do something like that, that could blow up in a negative way. You have to be prepared, and I just don't think they were prepared. And I think that's what really in the end of the day, they didn't do themselves any favor, because if they said, we believe in this, if you don't believe in it, so be it. Or if they said, we're sorry, that would have been either of ththose answers. You probably would have been more satisfied, or someone wouldn't have been satisfied, but you would have been more satisfied than what they did, which was, I don't even know what they did. But it's so hard, and I have so much sympathy for them. I mean, at ParkMobile, we went through a security incident. We had a hacker come in and steal a lot of our data, and yeah, I know. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to deal with as a leader of a company. Is what do? You kind of we were a victim of a crime, but consumers don't care. As far as consumers are concerned, someone, we were at fault as much as the hacker that stole our data. You just do the best you can, and so I'm just so empathetic to the marketing leadership at Anheuser-Busch that it's something that they never expected to happen. Just they suddenly were embroiled in a kind of a culture war issue, and it's a tough thing. But I think for marketers going forward, if you're gonna play that game, you just have to be prepared. What happens if, what's the crisis communication strategy if for some reason some people start taking machine guns and blowing up our product?
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, your advice earlier of being transparent, letting people know what you're working on, and then if they'd opened up and been very transparent, it wouldn't have been such a crisis.
Yeah.
So with that, I know I'm guessing there probably are a few more questions, but I'm sure Jeff wouldn't mind if you reached out or if he hung around for a minute. But I so appreciate you. I feel like everybody should leave this earth with having a standing ovation. So will you please stand?
Thank you, guys. And thank you.
Thank you for being an awesome marketer and an
Thank you.
awesome human.
Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah. And thank you,
All right.
Hot House.
Thank you, guys.